That actually has a history. It's been called. Yeah. Right, Andy?
Uh-huh.
Why don't you start us off, mister?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, my goodness. What a beautiful day it's turned out to be after this one. So, that is the Pledge of Allegiance. How about a call of order, roll call?
Brown,
Here.
Gilman,
Here, here.
Merrick,
Here.
McKellar,
Here.
Mauser.
Here. All right, do we have any changes in the agenda? Brad, did you have anything to add? I don't see any blue sheets or anything. Okay, this is a special meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it is.
So moved.
Andy?
Support.
Okay. Andy and Carl. All right. Does anyone have a conflict of interest, own any property over next to the Boardman River or anything that we should know about?
Our rough.
Or a road? All right. Seeing none, let's move on to our first public comment. Do we have anybody who'd like to say anything before we start?
A podium and there's no comment.
On this highly sensitive and charged issue? Okay. We'll move on to our first appointment. Jennifer, if you would, please.
So, Mark and I were tasked with the, job to come up with or devise a way to give Brad an appropriate, performance review. So this is a draft, it's open for discussion. The idea being that, not only looking at Brad's actual review, but also setting some goals for him to be working towards in the next 12 months as an employee of the board. So the idea, what I've done in the past that has worked well, and Mark and I talked about it, is the thought would be is meet with each one of the board members. I would be able to collect the feedback, put it into an aggregate report, and then from that aggregate report, you all can sit down with Brad and review the performance with him. If he requests, that can be closed session. If he doesn't request, then everybody can hear how his performance goes. So what I did is there's kind of a more discussionary part, and then there's a more goal-orientated part. So the first is just looking at different areas of what he does that can affect the performance of the organization. So management of the organization in general, execution of the policies, board relations, community relationship, leadership and employee relations. Now, at first I didn't have a rating on there, but I think Brad's a number guy. He likes to have numbers and ratings, so.
Can we use letters instead?
Do not use letters. Letters don't average well.
Yeah. So it would give some kind of credence for him or measurement for him to have a feeling of where he's falling in addition to the comments that might be collected around that, unless, Brad, you feel differently about that. And then the next section is a goal evaluation. Now, there were basically 3 goals that Margaret and I talked about that we might be able to reasonably hold Brad accountable for in 19, which would be looking at the staffing and employee engagement, employee relations, the board relations, and the public relations. So potentially going and looking at each one of those in regards to achievement, how has turnover fared, we got the employee survey in place, what have we done with those results, that kind of thing. For 2020, Mark and I brainstormed some, and then actually Brad and I brainstormed some ideas around goals for 2020. So the ones we came up with were create a comprehensive master asset management plan that includes roads, equipment, facilities, technology, and other items in the right of way. Obviously, I want them to be smart, so you want to have them specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. That's not true yet because this is in draft format, so there might have some refining around these. Maintain appropriate fund balance to ensure the stability of the road commission. Conduct an effective campaign to ensure millage renewal. And that would pull in the public relations and media from the previous year. Preparation, the union contract's up in 2021, so preparation for the union contract. Management of the strategic planning process and create a road commission strategic plan. And staffing, reduce employee turnover, and conduct baseline employee survey. Well, we would change that not to baseline in 2020, because we have the second. And then just general board relations. So that is my proposal, open to
Mr. Chair,
change.
if I could just comment, real
I'll
quick.
give you-
This is the first time I've seen this draft, okay, just so you know, I thought, I talked to Jennifer a couple times, we did some communications, but I thought, it's good that just, I asked her to just bring it, we could see it all together at the same time. I thought that would
Okay.
be, and then I just want to emphasize two things, is that we didn't really set any goals for Brad in 2019. I think we didn't do that, I think it was somewhat intentional, because it's just let him get in and figure out what he's got to work with and
Where's the
learn the board and
bathroom?
learn the staff and that kind of
Because he
thing.
I want
found
to comment to that.
He has found the bathroom
All
and
right.
does know our
Andy?
names.
So,
the 2020 goals, the third one, I don't like that on there.
Third one.
which one are we talking
The millage renewal campaign. I don't think that staff should be.
about? That's a mileage renewal on there.
Oh,
I
yeah,
would
it is a
agree with that.
mileage. Yeah. That's you're saying it's a board,
That's not something I don't think staff should be tasked with working towards a millage, because it's we using taxpayer money to, PR is fine.
Well, this,
Always have.
I understand it, I agree with this, with the intent of what you're talking about. It still has to be prepared by staff for the millage anyway. So, I mean,
Yeah, if you go back to the last millage, every time we had a public meeting,
yeah,
some of us were there as well as
yeah.
Jim was there, and every time we tune in 580 and they were talking about the millage, it was the manager's voice and maybe one of the commissioners. So to say that you can't, well, certainly can. Now, if we're bringing in boxes of envelopes and mailers that say, please vote yes, and having staff lick them and mail them out, that obviously is not proper.
Yeah, no, I do understand the sense of where you're at on this. Do you have anything to offer, Carl?
No, I think, just trying to digest this a little bit, I think, the points that we're hitting on, I think they're all valid.
Yeah, actually, I think the goals as a starting is good. I think you've hit, and I did want to speak to this, and you've hit 2019 kind of close to where, I mean, look, if nothing else, it was our goal to try to get the staff into the green as far as our relations, okay? I mean, that was really a big thing at the beginning of
I
the year.
agree.
And I think we've, well,
We
when
haven't
we
done
go
the
over this,
review
we can,
yet,
we
yeah.
can take a look at and review that and see if
You're
we've done
comfortable
that.
with those three?
I think so, I think that works fine. The only thing is, when you say meet with you, each one meet with you, I mean, is that necessary? I mean, couldn't we just, as we've always done, kind of fill it out, turn it in, and let you and Mark go over and add the comments and
Yeah.
do the averaging and discuss how you want
I think that's
Okay.
fine, yeah.
I'd like that.
it? Yeah, I'd like that,
Okay,
all right?
yep, it's easier.
Kind of a consensus
I
thing, I
might
don't think
put
we're.
this in like I could put it into a Survey Monkey, or even where you can just fill it out right online. Make it
Ooh, high
easy.
tech.
Like that.
That's why we hired her.
Yeah.
I can do it, I can do it easy.
I know how to create a Survey Monkey, that's
You
right.
can't do a survey monkey
Yeah.
then,
All right.
So on the millage one though, do we need to Andy's point, do we need to?
I may be overreading that, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're probably, I think we need, obviously he needs to prepare, the staff needs to prepare for the millage. And frankly, if it's done right, it'll speak for
But
itself.
my concern would also be if for some reason the millage didn't pass. the voters said, I don't have the money this year. The
Well,
state's
then
taking all this.
he just gets a
Does that
big-
fall on him and he gets nailed down? Because we're putting.
No, but he's gotta put all the reasons why we're going out there for, it, what
Yeah.
we're doing with that money,
Yeah.
how we're spending
Yeah.
that money. He's gotta give us all that information.
Yeah,
Oh, I
we could
Between
agree
him
with
and
that.
Phil,
Parentheses.
that's,
Just-
and that's what, I think that's the gist of what this question's going
Understanding,
at.
understanding advocacy, as someone who's tried to, you know, or has actually succeeded in taking on improper advocacy. I think that it's definitely, it's appropriate and legal to note the advantages of the millage, okay?
Correct. I
We,
agree.
we just cannot ask, and we cannot have staff ask for a specific vote of yay, nay, yes, passage, in such a way that it is a direct advocacy for passage, or frankly, defeat.
To that point, Andy, it would be the manager's responsibility to make sure we don't do
There you go. That's,
that very thing.
So that
And
would
we
fall
have
under
a
that too
plan.
then, okay.
So
Right?
yeah,
To keep Brad in line?
Right there.
Can't even say please.
Please,
Say please vote.
so, I mean, could we change, the wording more around a public education campaign in regards to the public,
Well, your
the
parentheses
millage?
do
I'm-
spell it
I'll
out
give
nicely.
credit to,
I mean, I sometimes are a little paranoid about
no, I think
verbiage
it's
that
good to be,
protect us, and
yeah, just
if-
because.
But that's
If
what,
Commissioner
what.
Jones
yeah,
says-
I see, you just take out ensure,
Campaign.
you just take out to ensure the millage renewal.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think that really, so I get what you, I really get when I reread this. Just prepare the millage, you know, prepare for the millage campaign.
Okay,
Take the word, somehow strike the word
Strike-
campaign,
Yeah, or, yes.
Yeah,
you know, and make it
I
more.
I think you get a sense of where we're
communications.
going in this.
prepare and
You
support
guys-
the millage campaign.
Campaign out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't even have campaign in here, so I can't, oh,
Oh,
it is,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
do, never
I was
mind.
gonna say, I thought I saw, that's what made me go, what?
Yeah. Prepare and support the millage renewal.
Yeah, and it should be millage, not mileage. I mean,
I
you we don't wanna be
know.
like Lansing.
We want to add miles onto the Act 51 map.
All right.
Do we need any vote of approval on this, or what is the board?
I think, just to.
Okay,
is
you guys know what you're up to.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough, you bring it back to us and then we go from there.
Yeah,
Okay.
what's the timeline here? We-
So, yeah, let's talk about timeline. So in a matter of days, I can have this updated and out to you.
And our November meeting, our November regular meeting, if we could meet 1 hour before,
Okay.
then we could conduct the,
Well, Brad needs to request a
We'll
closed
do this.
session. Right?
If you want,
If
he
you
might
want.
not want it.
we'll just hang a light bulb.
He might just
put a
sense there's gonna be a lot of
chair out
love and he wants everybody to see it.
there. But yeah, I mean, that's why I think November, we can do it casually, I mean, you're not rushed, by the regular meeting in November, and then have it effective for the first of the year.
That works for me.
Okay,
So do you wanna get us the
Yeah.
worksheet before that,
Yeah.
and then a week
Are
before
we
or
doing a
something?
Survey Monkey?
Yeah,
Or that.
I can push it out. So what,
What
I
is
don't
that,
know what
November
is today.
20th?
So this is like the
It's the Tuesday before
14th.
Thanksgiving.
So let's say it's out by the end of the week. You guys need
Well, that's
more
right.
than 2 weeks
Tuesday.
to get it back to me?
Shouldn't.
and I was gonna request if we could bump that up earlier than that, because I will be out of town then.
Okay, so get us,
Say once.
get us the option, get us the opportunity to do this as soon as possible, then.
So when is November's meeting then?
It might be
It's the Tuesday
changing.
before
I
the
think
21st.
Carl was talking about that.
At some point.
By a week?
wait.
Well, if-
When are you
if-
leaving?
Well, we could do it like the 18th or maybe even the 19th.
19th works.
The
Yeah,
meeting?
I thought you were gonna say the 15th. and
Oh.
then we were hanging up.
Drag him out into the blind.
Okay.
Monday, November 18th?
The 19th works better for me. I can do the
Oh,
19th, or the 18th, but the 19th would be better.
I
Is
can
that the
do-
same?
Okay, so no, it's a week before.
It's just
It's a
bumping
week
it up
earlier, it's
about a
bumping
week.
up a week.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
can make it,
Yeah.
So could you have them back to me by, if they're out by the end of this week, have them back by November
Oh, yeah.
1st?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So you sent it to our GTCRC email?
This is easy, hard script.
Yeah,
we
so
can-
check your email.
So anyway, if, I guess if.
Okay,
if
so,
it
so
works,
let's,
that'd be
let's take,
great.
let's take a vote right now then on the meeting date, the board meeting date, because
What was that date, Andy?
Tuesday the 19th at 6 o'clock.
Yeah? And then
And
you're
then
gonna
the
have
following
a regular
meeting at
meeting after
7.
that? Yeah? Can you guys have your materials together for the regular meeting?
We're talking about his review, of course
Whatever
he
you want.
can.
Are we gonna screw up any other scheduled?
No, because that's when we're gonna be probably talking to you about budget.
Budget,
anyway.
okay.
So, I mean, we're gonna be,
So somebody make a
We're gonna be
motion
working
to
on
I
it.
make a
the next week or
motion,
two.
I'll support Andy's motion that it move to the
19th with the special
And
meeting at
special
6.
So we start at 6. That's-
And can you get those
Special.
invites out to the group? Thank you. Please and thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, we have a new meeting time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so you'll see this by the end of this week. It'll take 2 weeks to get it back.
Piece of cake.
I can compile it and have it ready for you.
Awesome.
All right,
Sounds good.
super, thank you. Thank you for
very much.
letting me go early on the agenda.
All right. Well, you know,
You could have been the last 15
We did.
minutes like last month.
we do get the invoice once a month, and as they say.
Well, it's appreciated.
All right.
Now you're tearing the building
Thanks,
apart.
Jen. We'll send you.
Thank you.
Okay, action items, number 7A, award of roof repairs.
behind you, you can see what we have. The Springfield roof is low, and they are also available this fall. Bloxham isn't even available this year, and we'd really definitely like to get it done this year, because that back area does leak pretty bad, especially
All
when we
winter
start
long.
getting snow and ice built. It also matches the color. I mean, so it's definitely where we want to be. Story is completely out for price-wise. So our recommendation is to go with the Springfield, and if they get it approved, they can get it done before snow flies, or unless we get real early snow.
Very specifically, my question is on, because it's the hallway lunchroom area, and we have that beautiful sculpted piece of ice that comes down at the corner there, where the meat's there. Is this addressing that,
The intention, yeah, the
you know, the
intention,
leak
they're
of the hot
adding,
air?
yeah, they're adding insulation to that so that the temperature of it stays down.
Right. Well,
And so we should not have that issue, but they also are going to be working with repairing some of these space in between, like it's crawl space or whatever is up there, to make sure that we have an insulated, vented system set up there.
Well, we have a couple things going on here. Obviously, we've got a physical leaking problem with water, but we also have, besides that, we've got heat escaping out of
Yes.
the roof line or somewhere down there.
That's causing the water to come in.
Well, that's
Are
what
they-
I
are they
think.
Yeah,
tied
oh, it
together?
is.
All right.
Yeah, and they've been up, they've looked up
For
before,
the insulation
and they know what
inside?
they need to do. And they have said that they can address that with the $44,000 price. That is including addressing that area right back there. where
Right,
the-
and we prepared for this in our budget.
We had like 40 set aside.
Okay, all right.
My question to the insulation too, they've been in there, that insulation that's in there,
It's gotta go.
that's what I thought, okay.
Yeah, everything, all the stuff that's
Does it
in the
have-
actual ceiling is gone, gotta go.
Okay, that's my
Because number
question.
one, it's
Compromised.
compromised, but number two, it's also got some
All right.
growth that
Yeah,
needs to be removed.
What kind of insulation are they putting up in there? Are they doing blown in or foam?
There's a foam layer that's gonna go in between the roof and that, and then there's a secondary blown insulation for the bottom.
Are they gonna vent between the
Yes.
insulation and the foam in the roof? Or are
The-
they gonna
in
be
the- in
sitting on-
between
or
the-
sandwich piece?
The main area and the roof will be vented properly.
These are roof people, I'm not a roof people.
Move
so
to accept
I'm gonna have to
Springfield bid.
Trust that the
Well,
roof people.
what,
Well, we've got somebody
I-
who's done it and
I
somebody
have
else
seen
has
the
done it,
thing
so-
on the product, and they are putting insulation on the roof deck.
Yeah.
I've seen.
Which is what
Springfield's-
R20 is there, but that's not.
That's not the roof.
insulation.
Right.
But there is insulation.
That's like an
so that they are
R3 or
talking.
4 on
Right.
that
I
foam.
support the
equipment.
motion.
Who made the motion?
Bill?
Bill made the motion, you made the.
Bill likes to spend money.
All right, roll call, please.
McKellar,
Yes.
Hauser,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Merrick,
Yes.
Hillman.
Yes. See, that was easy. So,
We spec 60
okay. Award of
60 mil.
vehicle type purchases.
One thing I will say, I did go back and we did some further checking. The resale price of the Yukon that we currently have compared to a pickup truck is actually 6,000 compared to, or 6,000 higher for a vehicle that we're spending 5,000 more for. So in the long run, we end up a little better on trade-in value, and the mileage on the Yukon is about 1.5 miles per gallon better.
So, this is the purchase, but you mentioned trade-in. Those vehicles are going back to the dealer?
They will either go back to the dealer or back through the auction,
Probably through our gov deals.
Okay.
because our auction's been doing very well.
We're moving them along, we're not keeping them
No,
in-house, right?
no.
Okay, that's important.
Move to
So,
accept-
so you, what you'd like it then is the SUV?
Yeah, just
It
because
makes sense.
it's, and then also it's better gas mileage.
Okay, who made
so.
what? Bill?
Move to accept staff
Bill
recommendation.
and Mark,
Of $81,963.
Any other comments?
25 cents.
roll call.
I'm moving to turn next.
Maybe.
This will be in the 2020 budget.
Mauser.
Yeah, this is
Brown.
This is
2020.
2020, bud. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mauser,
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
McKellar,
Yes.
Hillman.
Yes.
Sign when.
Okay.
Purchase
All right.
when.
We are gonna make the commitment, but it's not gonna be until 2020 when they come.
So we'll get them after the first
Should I just
year.
go ahead and make a motion on this one before we start? I mean,
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event in the center ring.
boom.
If you'd like to, Mark, I'd like to hear this motion.
Yeah, really. Let's,
Do you have a prepared
I have a
motion?
prepared motion, yeah. Yeah, I do.
well,
Okay.
But I think. we
I'm gonna
should
give you
make
the
it-
background and where we stand here, and then we'll let Wayne give you some of the technical detail. Effectively, what we are doing now is we're moving into phase 2, as we discussed last time. We've discussed all of the short and midterm projects. Now we're here to talk about a crossing of the river, okay? With the addition of the information we've given you from September 17th and September 26th, by the time we're done here, we'll have an idea roughly of how much we're talking about over the course of the next 10 years to spend. Obviously, some of this is going to require some federal funds or some other form of grants in order to be able to pay for it, because it is a substantial cost. When we did the original selection of the contractor, which was OHM, we did a selection process, a QBS process, where they were selected, they were brought in, they were interviewed, and then we made a decision on the contractor. We selected the contractor, board said yes, go, and then we negotiated a price, okay? When we did that, we did the evaluation based on the entire construction, all the way from the beginning of phase 1 through the construction. So if the board is willing to go with it, we could choose the same contractor and continue on and move forward and begin work as soon as we get approval. Or we would have to go through the new QBS process and start again. And that would delay us some, just because of the nature of, putting it together and probably sometime in February. The problem being, and we'll talk about this, is, some of the stuff, yes, some of what we're talking about could be put off. Other parts of it, especially these roundabouts, if we want to build starting next year, we really need to be able to go before snow hits the ground. They need to get their eyes on the ground. So what I've also put together here is a time frame. The consultant time frame, next to what we feel is probably a little more realistic. Starting at the bottom of the first page, for phase 2, this is all of our environmental and other approvals. The consultant is saying about 2 years. Realistically, by the time all said and done, we're going to say it's probably going to be more like 2.5 years. We also then move in, we say, you know, that also includes the updated modeling, because we are gonna be changing the actual flow of the traffic, because we're gonna be putting in some roundabouts. So they're gonna update the modeling for taking into consideration what we're planning on with the roundabouts. For securing funding for the right-of-way, their estimation was 1 to 2 years. Wayne and Joe and I sat down with this and discussed it, and realistically, we're probably looking at more like 3 to 4 years to get all of the funding together, just because of how much we're talking about and how many different phases that we need to go through. The detailed design and bid documents, we're going with their high estimate, and the construction, we're going with their high estimate. So the consultant originally estimated that it would be 5 to 6 years if it was perfect, realistically 7 to 9. We're feeling it's probably more like, you know, somewhere 9 to 11 years to get the bridge in place and open. That's complete at the end of construction, okay? So I'm gonna have Wayne talk to you guys about the phase 2 and what it means to us and what it actually involves for us.
Before we do that, can I ask a question? Our short-term projects that we've already started talking about, we're gonna be doing those right along. We're working on that,
Yeah.
integrating those into our regular work.
Yes, and we're gonna vote on getting some approval from you by the end of the night here. Once this whole presentation is all put together and you see where we stand financially, we're gonna leave it up to you to decide how much you wanna push this and how fast we wanna move. But we're gonna ask for approvals for the midterm. Short term is pretty much what we're talking about, the painting and the signals. We've already got that, but the midterm projects, these roundabouts, we're gonna be looking at you for approval tonight.
Last meeting too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Because one way or the other, that's
see-
happening.
Right, I see the two, like phase 3, I see quite a discrepancy between what they're indicating and what our engineering and staff is indicating. And I think we need to address that up front, but not right now. I think, I just want to note that,
Yeah.
gentlemen, that we need to discuss that. And then
All right.
Wayne do his thing.
Hi, Wayne.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. So, phase 2 basically is dealing with the environmental impact statement. That's a very time inclusive and lengthy process, but a process that we cannot scrimp, save, or push along any faster than the due diligence that it requires to take. This, by going through this process, this will keep us in all the good graces of any funding mechanisms that are out there, namely the feds, and allows them to see that we're going through this very methodically, and we are addressing all the necessary steps and environmental sensitivities that are out there that we're going to be looking at this. So initially what we have is we're going to be following that NEPA process. This could be at the very high end, upwards of $1 to $2 million over a 2-year process, over a 2-year period there. We're estimating on the high side, but we know that we're going to be able to get some value out of the previous impact studies that was done for the previous original Hartman-Hammond crossing. There's going to be a lot of good background information into there, but everything has to be reviewed and then properly updated. And then we also look at any and all of the new, different recommendations and different processes that have come down that are now in play that weren't necessarily there back at that time.
Different acceptable practices.
Acceptable practices, additional things that we're looking at that are environmentally sensitive, both in plant species as well as animal and mammals out there. Snakes, hey, all those things are out there. So
Snakes can go. I don't like them.
we need them. They do a very important role in our ecology.
That's right.
So
They creep me out. That's all they do.
So those things are also gonna be looked at. We're gonna be looking at that and utilizing that past information. That's all still very good there. But we need to be kind of moving on through this and utilizing that. So if you recall from the east-west corridor study there, there's 3 potential crossings. And if you want to bring that up there, just as a reminder to the board. We had,
That's
let's
where you're off the
proceed
page.
forward in pages. Okay, so here's the first one. Hammond-Hartman connection there, and then there was an A that utilizes most all of Hammond Road, and then veers off as we get over toward 31. Route B there, after the crossing of the Boardman River, would start to look at another route and varying to the south. And then the third was Cass Road, and A is pretty much the one that really kind of vetted out from there, so that A corridor would be the one looked at. B was utilizing the MDOT railroad right-of-way, which that's an out. They're not gonna let us utilize that. And
We know that for a fact, right? They're absolutely dead
They've
set
been-
against it.
yes, they've been contacted on that, and they've told us that that rail line they're reserving that for future. So there's nothing there that they're gonna allow us to utilize.
That is just a shame.
And then C
That was their comment.
basically routed you back up to Hart.
Actually, it was disgusting.
But that was his big thing, he kept saying.
So all 3 of these, the 2 on Hammond Hartman and the one on Cass, all 3 of these are going to be looked at and reviewed and identified, dealing with the environmental impacts and those potential obstacles. And we need to be looking at those and then what mitigations would be involved onto those. So either of these are going to, deal with new bridges, and we're going to have these involved conversations with MDOT as to where to be coming out and joining the M31 and or US 31 and the M37 corridor on that.
Did you say we're gonna be looking at all 3?
We're
At the same
initially,
time?
we initially are gonna be looking at all 3, right? Those
Okay.
are the 3 recommendations that came out from, from our East-West Corridor study. So all 3 of those will initially be looked at. Now, we'll be taking those and as part of that process, we're gonna be talking also with MDOT. So we're gonna start to see where some of these kind of get vetted out. Now, the ideal would be to work this up to a point where we get to what's referred to as a TS analysis, type, size, and location. At that point in time, that's where you really start to kind of see what's practical, what's not practical, and at that point in time, probably then getting down to a preferred corridor.
So is this like what they were talking about, we're gonna go through and look at the different options until we eliminate all but one? And
Correct.
this is the 3 that were still viable according to what staff is looking at?
Well,
And
these
what the
are-
board is
yes,
kind of
these
giving a nod
were-
to?
Yes, these were the 3 that were, looked at, in conjunction with our stakeholders and the public that we've gone through. So these are the 3 that we're gonna be kind of looking. And it may not come out exactly, where these are kind of proposed going through, but that's part of that process of looking at your wetlands and you're dealing with your mitigations, and then looking at the overall type of corridor, where you're at, and then adjusting in which to fit that in.
So we're not at a point now where you've got a line drawn on the map,
No, we
and
are,
we're gonna go, that's the line we want, we're still going through the, here's
correct.
where the trees and the bugs and the birds and the swamps
Yes.
and the streams and all that.
Yep, we're gonna be fully vetting each of those 3 there,
Can we
so.
go back to the first one again and go
Roll
through
back up.
these? A little bit, that's number 3 right here, right? So, so that's actually, that's A and B are 1 and 2.
Yes.
Yes,
That's what I was,
yes, yep. Right. Okay.
in reality, we talked about A, and it is problematic because of the proximity to the other intersection.
South Airport.
Mhm.
And we'll have those conversations, and those are some of the different things that are gonna be pointed out by MDOT, and they're gonna be a big partner in on this, and those are the things that we have to be looking at, correct. So, one of the nice things, I think, or one of the very positive things that we have looking at with this process is the new one federal decision that has been set up. And so that helps streamline things through the federal process to where then all those different agencies that are gonna make comments into it are gonna have to all those are gonna come into one location point at the federal level, so that we don't wind up having one particular department fighting with another particular department. So all that's gonna come together. And that really should be at about the most, a 2-year process there, utilizing that.
So is that what they were talking about, the streamlining of some of the
Yes.
environmental at the federal level, was to get it where everybody's in the
Yes.
same book at least?
Yep,
You know,
yes,
interestingly, okay, so the original suggestion a number of years ago isn't even on here. Okay? B is the closest to that, but the original one had the bridge going across, up Hartman Parkway, and then turning and going
Towards
through
Silver Pines.
the back of McManus's property and through Olson property. And this is, B on this is not that at all,
No.
because it cuts
and that's not to say
south.
that couldn't still come about once we are getting in and we're really investigating the wetlands and those environmental
Well, that's
stuff.
it, that's it.
I
When
want
you-
you to procure the land. I mean,
You know,
it's in
Exactly
the
right.
way. you know.
All these things are gonna be playing in, and that's the process, that's what we wanna be able to go through and be able to fully investigate and vet with the consultant firms looking at those things. So we're gonna be kinda going on through all that, and it's our goal that we're addressing these environmental impacts and mitigating these issues so that we reduce those potential controversies that, inevitably come right along with all these types of projects here, so.
Well, yeah, I'd say just rather say A, B, and C. I agree that if you guys come up with, boots on the ground and get out there and you look at where could be the least impact, and away, you have to have requisites, like, it just simply can't be close to the intersection, right? We know that. We can't use the rail grid. So it's gotta be somewhere in there in between. So then, where is it gonna be the least impact? And that is what stopped the last bridge, besides the fact it was a crappy design. And this one is not gonna be designed that way at all. It was the landing on the west side and the tributaries that it was affecting up there. So, that information is still available in the previous documentation, and those streams have not moved.
Right, and that's what the previous environmental impact statement,
That's what you're
we've
referencing
had,
here, right?
we're gonna be referencing that,
Okay.
correct. So all that's gonna be coming in. So with this, we're gonna be kind of, proceeding forward with that is our intent. We're gonna be looking at those, the best routes, and it does come down to, at the end, is cost is gonna be looked at, impacts of the environment are gonna be looked at, and how well does it accomplish that overall purpose and need that we identified within phase 1 of this study. So that's all very important to keep in mind and to be looking at, and that's what's phase 2 is gonna be dealing with. We're, keeping that original purpose and need in mind, that Pell process that we utilized, so that we can continue to show to FHWA and any other concerned parties that we're following that process out there, that everyone, that this is being looked at and going with. So right now, we're in that early recommendations, that we are following our signal optimization and those intersection improvements. And we're gonna be kind of proceeding along with this with your blessing here later on tonight.
just let you know, I should have tried to remember who this was. Somebody recently, like in the last week from Leelanau County, approached me and said they're in their government, they are keenly interested in what we're doing here because they want that connection to go all the way up to the county like it was
I know I've heard
originally
that
planned.
a dozen times from some other people.
Yeah, it's a legitimate conversation. It's not a hopeful
Up to
conversation.
633 is their hope somewhere along that way.
Yeah, it's somewhere up in that way, yeah. Run up through Long Lake Township. They're all seem to be on board on wanting.
Alright,
I got a quick question. You said the NEPA process. Can you give the 15-second Cliff Note version of what that means?
NEPA is your National Environmental Protection Agency, the Protection Act. That covers everything, so that's dealing with everything that's endangered, whether it be fauna or animal. All those things have to be looked at and reviewed. And just about everything we do does create impacts.
Mm-hmm.
The goal here is to minimize those impacts, and where we do have those impacts is to identify them and mitigate them. It's not to say that, oh, that's there, you can't touch it. It's there to identify it. What kind of impacts are we gonna have? And what is the best mitigation for that? And that's through that whole process.
Is it possible that there is a blessing to that, in a sense that by going through their process, that we might qualify for money to make sure that we are following their process? That might also help us with our overall.
Most
goals.
definitely, and that's why we are
Yes,
recommending
okay.
that we go this process and go through this, because if there is any manna from heaven, if there's
Yeah.
federal grants available or something that comes through, and if there's any federal dollars, even to 1 penny, if we don't follow the NEPA process, we're not gonna be eligible for it. So it is very crucial, and the state actually follows that very closely as well. So anything that we're gonna do here, if we are gonna be looking, which we're gonna be recommending that we're gonna be looking for, additional funding sources out there, is we need to make sure that we are following this to the T in order to be eligible for those funds.
And for me, the layperson, who does that process? Is that in-house? Is that our
This is very
like the
specialized
OHM
work.
type person, or is that a person
Yes.
who,
Yeah.
I
This
mean,
is, this will be utilizing a consultant for this that have got some very diverse resources available to them. Our previous, through phase 1, as you noted there, they utilized a number of local resource experts. And that's what I suspect that they would do again, because they're going to be the best knowledgeable of our local area.
so that's not something that can just be pushed through and, oh, look, we followed the process and we checked the box. There are
No.
people there is a high standard to
Very high
make sure that we're
standard.
following, or that the process is
Yes.
being followed.
And a very high review of that, correct?
Okay, thank you. I feel much better about that now.
Are we gonna talk about this funding needs and board
Yeah.
approval?
that's the next, we're gonna keep
Because
going.
I read that paragraph
All right.
5 times and I'm still
Let's
not sure.
let staff continue.
Alright, phase 3, we're at, securing the necessary funding could take anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And I know you wanted to talk about it, but, it's hard to predict, obviously, what's gonna happen. But, based on the number of issues we have and all of the funding that we're going to need to attain, 1 to 2 years seems a little optimistic for us from what we've seen in previous attempts to get large-scale financial aid or federal aid. And, you start talking about these projects, you're talking probably in the $50 million range. So we're going to need a lot of money to be accrued here, and we're going to have probably more than 1 or 2 grants. It's going to have to be a multiple source of funds to get to where we need to be so we can put this in to play. So That's where we stand with 3 at this point. It's a couple of years away before we really can even start looking, because we're not gonna be eligible until this phase 2 process is done. So, but in a couple of years, when we're done with phase 2, that's gonna take a while, and we're gonna have to start accruing these financial aid awards, plus we're gonna have to start working on purchasing right of way at that point also.
Well, I'll come right out and say it, and I trust you guys in your judgment, and I can say that is right the area where the stall's gonna happen. And that's my biggest concern, is that when you're looking at in a period where it's 3 to 4 years, that's a lot of time for people to hammer the crap out of you, and it's.
I
you know what I'm saying?
agree.
I mean, I don't know what to do about it, but it's a.
But we make some things happen on Hammond Road, and we basically start the momentum in the direction that we're going. And I think it's going to have a lot more impetus if we have some real results that are bringing us toward it. So, I mean, I understand,
Well, that puts us out 6 years.
it is what it is, we have to get these things done anyway.
Yeah.
So, it's all a matter of the staging of the whole thing. Which brings me to another thing, and I know that this is kind of off where you're at right now, but looking at where we're going to be in the end, in terms of the overall traffic patterns. There's still those 2 pieces of property that are available at the corner of roughly at the corner of 4 Mile and US 31. And if we could start looking at what it's gonna take to acquire those properties and get that as a part of our plan, because I think that ultimately that will be the best way to work through a transition of any major traffic from there to here, so to speak, so.
And I'm not aware of any property that's for sale there.
There's a couple of houses there, it's commercial land, it's right next to the Don's Drive-In, the Speedway. I mean, just,
Yeah, but you're not talking about the Speedway itself, right?
No.
Talking behind it.
talking behind it, yeah. So, I mean, I'm spitballing here a little bit, but it's, Anyway,
Never
so
too
you,
soon,
huh?
never too soon.
We gotta look at it. So,
And to Mark's point, I'm in agreement that, you get that 3 or 4 years out there, that's sitting out there a long time. But going back to Wayne's point, the first 2 years have to be done this way. I mean, we have to do our diligence, or 3 and 4 are irrelevant. If we don't have this other stuff in place in the first 2 years, it's just not gonna happen. Because there's no way they're gonna allow us to go it alone, I guess, if for no better term.
Well,
You
what, think about it, like you said, like the NEPA process is 2.5 years, okay?
Right.
That happens. What we're talking about is adding 3 or 4 behind it. Additional.
Well,
That's
but-
what I'm concerned about.
but
And-
that's,
At that point though, in that 3 to 4 years that we're talking about adding, we're still building roundabouts on Hammond. And wide on Hammond.
Usually it's
So-
about that
right,
concern.
but
then if we
but
put
it's
out-
still that 3 or 4 on top of that, that's still in the scheme of the 11 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, that's the process
Well-
we have to deal with, unfortunately. I mean, it's not, and it probably is a good process too, because then it is a methodical thing where it's done and thought out properly. It's not a rush through, where you say, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're out there with a bulldozer tomorrow, I mean, I
Well,
think that
Yeah.
it's the due diligence.
Jason's ready to hop in.
Well, it's the due diligence. It's unfortunate, but that's the way the system, I mean, that's how we have to operate.
Well, I think if we go.
As far as timing, but it's probably a good thing too.
let's talk about
So,
how we're gonna
The,
do the
the
Hammond
next,
Road.
well, the next phase, after that is getting the actual design of a bridge done. So that's a year to a year and a half. We could, in theory, start as we're accruing these federal funds. So we may be able to bump it back potentially. but we'd have to be pretty sure that we're close. You know, we don't want to spend a ton of money if we're 5 years out at that point. You know, we want to make sure we're building something and we know what we need exactly. So, you know, at that point, you know, we're getting close, and then construction, it is what it is. It's going to be 2 years. So,
Well,
you know.
If we have 3/4 or, you know, 3/4 or
Yeah.
2/3 of the funding, I think it's important that the residents see the design early on to rest assured that it's not
Yeah.
the same as slapping a couple of tubes and putting a ton of fill in.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's the perception that needs to become a reality.
And I think, you know, for your conceptual design is a whole lot different than the actual physical, you know, how is this bridge held up? You know, what's holding this bridge up? That's the majority of what it's gonna be, is, you know, the engineering end. But a conceptual of it, I think, would be produced earlier, so they'd say, look, this is kind of what we're thinking it's gonna look like. This is where we're running it, we'll already know that, so we'll just be able to, they can put it in and it'll make it look like it is in place already. So, and then when we get here, this is kind of where we need to start making some decisions. So, funding needs and the board approval. First of all, because the last time we were in a working session, so no decisions were made. So we need to know, number one, you know, we had discussed a little bit about the airport roundabout. So I put in 2 different charts below that of what it would run. Granted, we don't know what the costs are going to be after years 1 and 2, but I know the total for the bridge is going to be 50 million is what their estimate is. So we just put the 22 through 31 at the bottom with the 48 million to get the total. If we do not do roundabouts on South Airport, you're at almost 12 million for all the roundabouts and widening. And then 50 million for the crossing and all the way out to US 31 for a total of about $62 million. If you decide you want to put in the airport roundabouts and the boulevard down the middle of it, then that cost for everything shy of the bridge goes up from 12 million to 19.5,
I know how much
which
you wanted
puts
that
us
roundabout.
at 69.5, $70 million.
Just not gonna happen.
So, I guess the first thing we need to know is,
No roundabouts in South Airport, is that what you needed to know?
you guys say yes, and then I mean,
Do we need a show of hands?
Yeah, I mean, you know, ultimately, I have no desire, and frankly, I
I think
would,
we should take a vote,
Okay.
vote on it.
I'm gonna say at this point, no on the South Airport, but I don't wanna rule them out completely, because we don't know what's gonna happen. in
other
10
boards can
years.
always vote
But
differently.
From the
Yeah.
decision making.
but that's why I would
no
like to
reason.
say yes, you know, if that's where you're at, then a vote would be
So-
nice, so we have
So
it.
what,
I'll
A
make
motion to exclude the South Airport boulevards from,
That's what I was
And
gonna
roundabouts.
And
say,
roundabouts.
at this time.
yeah, you better craft this very professionally, very, very professionally, very thoughtful.
I mean, and the reason I don't see a reason for the roundabout at this point is we're doing the signal optimization on there, so we're spending that money. Then we're gonna yank them out before we know if that takes care of the problem. And I think that a lot of those issues on South Airport are gonna be resolved with that optimization, so
it's,
until we see what that optimization
it's
does.
not even the traffic levels, it's not even the traffic. I mean, there's so many reasons to not even frankly go down this road. Traffic has, by the way, improved since 8th Street's open, which is really the oddest thing, but I guess a couple percent here and there can really make a difference. But I'm just, you know, I mean, I've gone through the arguments myself. I mean, there's a great difference between a rural environment and an urban environment insofar as roundabouts are concerned. And it's a little too busy on South Airport for them. And it's busy in a lot of ways, both motorized and non-motorized traffic. So.
Well, I think we are like everybody else, we look at South Airport Road today as it is today. And if you have enough vision, you can see South Airport Road not being a commercial corridor, quite frankly. And as it becomes ailing and the commercial areas continues to get weaker, which is, I think it is, internally out, that South Airport Road is a fantastic opportunity for people in the jurisdictions to convert it into high-density housing and make that a boulevard and make that a not commercial but residential type area. But today we're looking at it as putting roundabouts in based on the structure of the commercial zone and where they're situated today and everything. And if you try to put that round peg in that square hole, it doesn't work. But if you change the whole dynamic of that area, then it does. But that's why I say I wouldn't rule out, I wouldn't want to say tonight that we would never do it because we're a board here tonight looking at it. So trying to figure out how.
Bill wants to.
Yeah, well, feel free. Anybody who wants to go for it.
But I just say that we move forward at this time without any my motion would be to move forward with the proposal without South Airport roundabouts or the boulevard.
And any support? Support?
I'll support that.
Okay, support. There we go. So, all those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, I understand. All right, just as a last comment on that, I mean, we did, the glaciers did take about 10,000 years to recede from Michigan, and that's about how long it'll take for that unlimited money to pop up with that wonderful vision.
I disagree.
So,
I think there's people working on it right now.
yeah, that's
Okay, so now we
My
get to
life.
the actual financial portion of it. What we're requesting tonight is funding to begin work on these short/medium-term projects, mainly the roundabouts and widening. It's going to involve contracting with the consultant for the design and part of the inspection. And that's basically what we're looking at right now is just the first 4 roundabouts. We're going to take this 2 years right now. We'll come back to you after we start getting updates, and we'll talk about that after we get some stuff taken care of here. But we'll be able to come back then and have a better, more accurate idea of what everything's going to cost and how we actually go. I mean, these are estimates for us now, but what we're asking for is approval for a total of $485,000 over the next this fiscal year and the next 2. We offer you option A, which is what we would recommend, and that's use our standard engineering services contract with OHM Advisors for year 1 at a cost of $230,000. We'll be going through a brand new selection process for our general engineering services, which will take effect January 1, and we would include year 2 as part of that approval. But we would allow year 1's work to complete with them, even if it exceeds January 1st, so that whoever starts work on it would be the one who would complete the work on the phase, that first year's worth of work. Option B would be to wait until we have our new standard engineering services contract in place, include both years in that contract, which would still be $485,000, but it would begin in January. The only problem with that is it may delay our construction of roundabouts by a full year, because the chances are pretty good if we approve them in January, they're not going to be able to see the ground until April to start doing surveying and getting an idea of what's out there. So that would delay us probably, because by the time you get all that and all the designs done, it's probably not going to fall into next construction year's projects.
Have you considered the order in which these projects would be done?
It's the order that we had from the first meeting, which was, when we talked about it, it was on this sheet.
Okay.
So that covers all of our order. So the first one is Hammond and 4 Mile. Keystone and Cass, Keystone and River, and Garfield and Hammond. So those are the first 4.
That's in the first year?
No, that is not all in the first
What is
year.
the first years?
The first year, we're talking about design and getting stuff ready, and then constructing it in 2021. So it could be, all of it would be ready, designed and everything, and we'd be set to go for 2021 spring as soon as weather breaks on Hammond and 4 Mile. And then we would also hit, we would be working on the design of Keystone and Cass, Keystone and River, which would then be built in 2022. And then Hammond at Garfield is a construction of 2023.
So I received 3 phone calls, and they were all about that Hammond and 3 Mile was the least pressing of all the intersections we were looking at, and we were gonna start with that one? That's the question, that's
No,
exactly
4
what I said.
Mile.
4 Mile, yeah, 4 Mile. And they're like, you're starting with that one?
Yes.
Why, they're like, why would you start with the least pressing of them all that were identified? And the answer, I never really got to an answer because it was noted that during our meeting, and I don't know where the actual comment came from, but it was the statement of something like to the effect, well, we'll try that one first and see how we do. You know?
No, that's not what we said.
Yeah.
What we said was-
That's the way that it was interpreted.
Yes.
That's,
What we said was,
Just
this
facts.
is a lower impact one. It's something that can be designed, and we can be sure that everything is in place in time for construction. We don't have to require any right-of-way at all. And it gives not only our team time to get familiar with everything and the order of construction, as well as having our inspectors get some experience out there on a roundabout that they're not sitting there staring over their back the entire time. They can actually pay attention and learn as they're going. It's a one that we can fit in now. The rest of them, we're talking about some right-of-way acquisition potential.
right.
And we're talking about impacting other people. So we need that extra year to be able to start talking to these people and saying, okay, we're not necessarily taking any of your property, but we are gonna have you move your driveways. Or maybe we're gonna take a sliver of your property, this is what our recommendation is, this is how we're gonna help you, so that we can get a final solution put together that works both for us as well as the property owners. And
Well,
it's
it
gonna
makes
take a
sense.
little
It ma-
longer.
It makes sense when you put it out like that. It makes sense. So,
How hard is it to take it from a 1-lane roundabout, which is the plan for 4 Mile, and turn it into a 2-lane down the road? I mean, what's the difficulty factor? How much cost does that add? That would not, would it be more cost? Obviously it'd be more cost,
But more cost effective.
but would it
to
be
do it
more
right up
cost
front.
effective to do it up front?
Those are gonna be some of the very questions that we're gonna be asking and working with
Okay.
consultants that have designed
Good question.
numerous roundabouts. Because we've got several different ones that we're looking at, and we wanna make sure that we go about this the right way, that we're not putting something in that we then have to take out or modify extensively in order to possibly have something to expand.
I find it interesting that, the conversation between doing a 2-lane roundabout or a 1-lane roundabout, when I look at, like out at Fife Lake, that's a 1-lane, that's on a state highway.
Yeah.
So I don't,
And I've been through it quite a few times. It works very well.
yeah, and I
It
don't
works
see
very
why we
well.
would necessarily be putting the money into a 2-lane.
That
Yeah,
works
granted,
very well
it
there,
doesn't
even in
hurt
heavy
to ask for a way
traffic.
to upgrade
You
it,
still get
but-
out.
But what we're talking about straightening out the hourglass on Hammond anyway. And how far out are we gonna have the 2 lanes on either side?
Well, we are planning on going from here down beyond, all the way beyond 3 Mile. I think we were gonna end where the bus
That bus
turnoff is to go into the schools.
There's the entrance to this
And, you know, so at this point, you know, that's a convenient point. It's past the major portion of traffic, and then we're coming through that roundabout with a one-lane roundabout. And a one-lane roundabout will handle a lot of traffic. But you start getting into Garfield and Hammond, 3 Mile and
Higher
Hammond,
counts. and-
that's higher than what that state highway is.
Yeah, yeah, it is, that's true.
I mean, that's a higher
Because
volume.
you're in an
Yeah.
urban area, you got density.
Yeah. So
That's-
you really knew,
That's the answer.
yeah, you really need to have that 2-lane
Right.
roundabout. It's like, if you look at what we have out on 72 that the state built, that
Well,
works
and then that would
wonderfully.
be, and that'd be my concern too, for the people out in East Bay Township, out in the Spider Lakes area, for example, who come into work, you know, every day and, you know, I guess we really need to take a look at the traffic counts there too, and see if they're anywhere close to, you know, requiring that additional.
So
Capacity.
we're looking for a motion for the short and medium-term projects.
Well, we're looking at just, yes, and it's option A or option B. You can choose to, you know,
Option A is
start,
staying with OHM,
Yep,
option
and-
B is going with a different.
and it would start after January, which would then push us, you know,
Right.
it's gonna push us. It's gonna be, because it's gonna take a long time to get these designed and everything else taken.
I'm gonna bring the elephant that's over here in the corner that's in the room
I knew
and
you were
say
gonna.
right up front, say, listen, you know, when I understood the necessity to come up with the data sooner than the state would provide it, and where we had to come up with $50,000 to do that, I understand that. Although that's a bitter pill, and I think our board had to swallow it. And that somewhat was out of their control. But that, they're supposed to know this stuff, they're supposed to see this stuff a little bit ahead. I'm pretty uncomfortable, and quite frankly, the way things were handled in the public was abysmal. And I don't want us to forget that. And now we're stepping into the biggest part of this now. And I'm not comfortable as a board member securing an agreement with some organization that could pretty much arbitrarily put a significant price increase on us. And then secondly, not listen very well to the board up front. And then subsequently, when we did raise a concern, we were somewhat dismissed. I didn't forget it. I doubt you did either. So I just gotta say that, bring the elephant out, talk about it. And if it costs us an extra year to get a different company that maybe would do a better job, then so be it.
Bill,
It says using our standing engineering services contract, the OHM. I guess, not to be overly jargon laced here, but can we get a little synopsis of what the deliverables are from OHM for the $230,000?
That is including the design, and it is including them having part-time inspection on the actual construction. That's how we kind of built that price together. So they're gonna take care of the majority of the design and everything with us, and they are going to have somebody here to make sure our guys can get up to speed on inspection. And that's, I mean, we're still using them now for different things as part of our standard contract. And this is, I want to make sure we're talking here, this is just for design of roundabouts and inspection of roundabouts right now.
okay.
When we talk about phase 2, that's a whole nother,
Right.
that's the huge,
Fair enough, yeah.
So we use OHM right now, correct, for engineering services, that's what the contract that we've got. For that application versus the consulting is a different issue than the engineering services, correct?
Well, we have the engineering services contract that we use for design and consultation here. And we have both KPM as well as OHM that we currently can utilize for those services. We also have engineering construction services, and we've got firms available for that, for helping us out. Then we had over on the other end, there was the whole process for the East-West corridor, and that was a separate separate contract.
And so we've utilized them, you've worked with them, they've come through, they haven't had any crazy or strange price increases on that side of their
No,
business, is that
we've
correct?
been utilizing them. We currently are using them for the design of 3 bridge structures, 3 deck replacement projects out there right now, and they've been in line and
On time, on budget?
online on budget. The budgets with keeping in mind that as we move forward with the 2 deck replacements on River Road, those originally started out as just as resurfacing projects for those. But once we got further into those projects there, we found that there was the deck themselves were not in as good a condition, and by the time that we looked at all of that, we could actually go to deck replacements for a relatively small amount of addition, and then wind up with structures that are gonna last us for a good 30, 40 years.
So you're, as our engineer, you're comfortable with their services they've provided?
I'm
At this
comfortable with
point.
the services that they've provided, and I'm very comfortable with their expertise on a number of these different elements that we're looking at, namely roundabouts.
I think it behooves us to bear in mind that OHM was the top of the pyramid, and they created these teams working for them, and the teams and the people and the jobs that each were doing for the East-West Mobility Study is gonna be a whole different group of people, well, not a whole, but a great deal. The whole complexion of the team that will be working on this is gonna be different.
These are not the same
These
people, same
are-
teams.
I mean, there might be a few the same thing. But for the most part, what they're gonna be doing is considerably different than what they did in the East-West Mobility Study. So
That'd
it's
be
not an
comfortable
apples
to
to apples
motion.
comparison.
Hmm?
I'll make a motion at this point.
Okay.
I make a motion, we follow staff recommendation with option A to use the standing engineering services contract with OHM Advisors for year one at a cost of $230,000.
I hear a support.
I'll support
Okay, Bill?
it. Since Carl's not.
All right. So Andy and Bill. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Carl?
Well, I just, you know, to follow up on Wayne's thing too, this is really, we're not looking for outside input. This is engineers that are gonna engineer this on site of what we got. And I agree with Mark, it was a bitter pill to swallow. You know, and I think OHM let us down, but I think the state of Michigan let us down also. I think that was a lose-lose for us in both cases. So I think, you know, this one here, I think with, like you said, we're gonna be dealing with engineers in the field, not that same group, and not having to have the MDOT information that we may not ever get.
All right, I'll have the last word on this and we'll take a vote. I wasn't real happy with the performance by OHM at a number of different levels. However, I'm also a person that knows how to get beyond where we're at, and frankly, it doesn't do us any good to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, either. I think we learned a lesson, and I think that next time we do some planning as far as costs, we might have something to say about unexpected expenses, etc. In any event,
Well, Jason, we're gonna have that decision in about 5 minutes.
well, that's true. We still have to have a
We're talking
contract
about
process.
roundabouts, so.
Roll call, please.
Merrick,
Yes.
McKellar,
Yes,
Mauser,
Yes,
Brown,
Yes.
Gilman.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Very good.
I love the enthusiasm.
Okay, so now we're talking about phase 2 of the bridge crossing. This is the bigger portion of it. This is what Wayne talked to you about, gave you the details of what needs to happen here. This is going out and, like I said, getting the boots on the ground and looking at everything, documenting everything, making sure that everything we do meets all of the requirements so that when we do start applying for federal aid, then we have met all the requirements and will be eligible for everything. At this point, the estimate is $1 to $2 million based on, how much they can reuse. Obviously, that's a wide range. At this point, they are not willing to give us a firm price because we will be negotiating with whoever we select. But at this point, we have confidence in the team that they have set up. A lot of people from local will be involved. We'll have some people that can come in and that have had some experience in the area. And we would recommend selecting OHM for phase 2 and have staff begin negotiations with them for the costs involved in phase 2 up to $2 million. Option B is to begin a brand new QBS selection process. It would involve some time. We'll have to redo how we're doing our QBS from the last time, and we will turn around and have something hopefully to present to the board in February, if that were the case. And if that were the case, then we would look, after the board approves it, we would begin negotiation with whoever comes out on top of the selection process. I would assume we would have, some of the same team people that selected the consultant for the interviews. So it's a little time consuming, it's staff time, but we can do it either way. It's up to the board at this point. Our recommendation, as I said, was to keep going with OHM for this phase.
Fire it up.
Notwithstanding, what I already stated, and I won't repeat it. I think for this kind of money, we are absolutely obligated to bid it out. I mean, it just, if they hadn't have done anything or not, I'd be looking at this going, man, we got it, but this is a lot of money, and this is a journey we're on, and by God, we better pick right. And you know what, at the end of the day, if they come out on top, they come out on top, on a fair bid process. But if they don't, they don't. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not afraid of delaying it. For that kind of money.
Other thoughts?
Seems to me the difference between option A and option B is whether we sit down and negotiate with one individual, one group of individuals to come up with the details, or if we go out there and do the QBS process and bring in other individuals to sit down and basically do what's going to amount to is, and maybe I'm wrong, but the same negotiations to refine the details again. So I don't know, I hate to say I'm a little ambivalent, but I can see the point that it's a lot of money. And, maybe we do need to throw a wider net, I guess, keep the pencil sharp. Maybe the negotiations would be more intense if there were 3 or 4 people involved in the negotiations rather than one.
Can we explain here? Let Wayne explain exactly the nature of what we did last time, so you guys can be up to speed on this too.
So a qualification-based selection process is, we're not talking dollars, but we are taking a look at each of their qualifications, each of these companies that present their qualifications. Based on that and the areas that we're looking at, we go through this process and review each of them. We go through a rating process, and then we come up with a particular company that we are going to work with on this process. And once that company is then selected, then we negotiate price. So we're not doing this, we're not comparing company A with company B and kind of working them out and putting them in each corner and seeing who comes out on top. We are going through the process and we are selecting the best company based on their qualifications. That's the whole QBS process.
Maybe that process doesn't work for us.
So with that having been said, I don't remember when you came on board, Wayne, if you were part of the original process or not, when we
No,
hired.
that was prior to me.
So there's, Joe was here.
Yeah.
And Steve. And Deb.
And Commissioner Mauser was, I believe,
I was here. And it was. it sat
You were
in
here when
with-
the first
well,
two-track was put
I
in.
sat in with the interviews
Okay.
of the basic, of the different people of phase one as well. And heard them all come in, talk about the teams, what they were gonna do, and the whole thing. And granted, it is qualification based. And I guess it would go back to how stellar were we on board with our selection? Was it a runaway? That they were head and shoulders above the rest. And they were better than most, but as I recall, there was a couple of close calls. I know there's a certain psychological thing too of how intensely, but it's going to come down to negotiations eventually. But we have to make
Okay.
good pick.
I hate to put Joe on the spot, but I'm sorry, you were there. You're the engineer. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, and was there anything that would give you reason to say, hey, we should probably go back to the drawing board and start over with the process of reselecting somebody?
My recollection of the original selection was that when we selected a contractor, we were looking at phase 1, 2, and 3. Knowing that phase 2 and 3 may not be the same contractor, but also that option was there. And when they presented to us, they presented their phase 1 and how they were going to go about it. And then phase 2 and 3 were part of that, which was selecting lines on a map, going through the process of all the environmental clearances, and then also some design work to follow all of it up. So as part of the original selection process, some of what we're talking about today was included in that selection process. But it wasn't a guarantee.
Just to clarify a little bit, I'd point out too that the team that we would be selecting through this QBS would be different than the team that was selected for phase 1. Because, I mean, for phase 1, we had PR.
Yeah, it's a different.
We had all kinds of stuff there that's not going to be involved here. And there were some weaknesses and some strengths of the people we interviewed based on that team for that particular function. There's a possibility, I think, that the team that would be presented to us for these would be different people, different faces, and different strengths and weaknesses.
I'm not gonna follow up for both Bill and Joe.
That brings an interesting point, because if it's a different team, you can't go based on what the criteria from the first round for phase 1.
And then Andy.
So when we were looking at this, and I interviewed for part 2, Bill or Joe or both, or Steve, if you were in the room, I can't remember, you weren't, never mind. What was the feeling of the people who were interviewing going forward with phase 2? Was it to re-go through the process or stick with the one that we selected?
I think the feeling would have been that, given the background knowledge of phase 1, it would give them benefits for phase 2.
But it wasn't a guarantee.
Correct.
All right.
I wasn't looking for, I just want to make sure I knew what the spirit of the discussions were then.
I'm in agreement with Mark. It's a lot of money just to say we're gonna hand over to somebody without bidding it. I do also remember that the original one with OHM was that it was gonna be the step 2, step 3 process. I do remember that too. And maybe the thing here is, being that we don't know, is we sit down and get the particulars of it, and if we think it's just outlandish, then we start over again.
Okay.
I mean, we can always say no.
Wayne, you mentioned basically it's not like a bidding. You essentially alluded that we're not bidding people price or whatnot. At the same time, so essentially you said we select somebody and then we find out how much we're gonna pay. And that's kind of what you said. Okay, now, what if we do this in maybe a little different way? What if we get a couple of people, or a couple of these outfits as qualified, and then let them bid the engineering planning services? I mean, doesn't that seem like, I mean, in terms of doing benefit for the taxpayer, it seems we should be, I mean, he's right,
It's our fiduciary.
it's our fiduciary
Well, it is.
responsibility.
Fundamental thing.
Dollar-wise.
I don't understand how we
Probably
can select
can-
somebody and not know if they're gonna be the more expensive guys, because frankly, they trip a lot in the swamp, what is this,
It's unorthodox, isn't it?
it
It's not the way it's done in the
seems
industry, but-
different, I mean,
It's a process that has been out there that is really being pushed over the years by
those agencies.
by your larger,
Carl's
and
still
also
in
at
business plan around.
and also at the state and federal levels, they really push those. I've got to tell you, I've come from smaller organizations, all right, and we've always had kind of a blended, because no one was comfortable with going the straight QBS route. It does put there is a lot of additional work when you're doing that, because it's very hard to then start to compare apples to apples on that. There are, potential pitfalls. You've got to very carefully go through all that. And so the process takes a little bit longer that way, in my humble opinion. But then again, I've not been involved with a lot of straight up QBS process in selecting a firm and then going through the price negotiations with them.
It just seems to me if I were running an engineering firm, and I would be willing to bid in a competitive environment. You send a guy through the environment itself. I mean, it's going to take a couple of days to have somebody kind of, briefly identify certain geological things and kind of get an idea how long it's going to take to map out, to plan out, and whatnot. And then, to some extent, it's always a little bit of a guess. It just seems, when you're talking that kind of money, there's a lot of room there that somebody's, they may or may not build it in, but if you got competition, you're not going to build in as much, for the overages. And
I mean, there's a structural difference here. I mean, if the QBS is more like what I would reflect on saying, it'd be like a design-build process, where you're sitting down and you pre-selected who you're gonna work with, and then you set up budgets. You say it's gonna be a design-build, you go through, and there's a lot of trust, and there has to be a pretty good scope in order to come to a final reasonable conclusion at the end. If you're gonna hard bid it, then you have to have some very specific scope items, so everybody is in effect bidding the same thing. So I guess it's a matter of approach, and the first thing we gotta decide is, are we comfortable, seemingly, nail on the head there, is this the process for us, the QBS process we really wanna do? Or do we wanna back up and say, no, we're gonna go back, and then we're gonna look at this as strictly as a hard bid situation? In which case, then we will have to then put it out there with sufficient scope and documentation so that it can be effectively and reasonably bid. If you have a sloppy scope, and you get all these different bids, you're gonna wind up with all sorts of change orders before you're all done, all over the place, and your costs are gonna escalate phenomenally anyway. So there's risks and there's dangers with both. I guess we just have to decide what we're most comfortable with and where we wanna go with it. How much confidence do we have in the ultimate party that we, are we comfortable with the OHM that they're gonna be fair and reasonable and honest with us, and we can negotiate on good terms and come up with a fair and equitable price? Or are we gonna try and, get a hard bid, so to speak, for these services, or a harder bid, more defined costs, and then deal with the prospect of change orders and so forth in the end, which also can affect the price and again, the people you invite, you have to make sure they're equitable, honest people that's gonna give you an honest hard bid. I mean, we all know what happens. We've seen projects where hard bids are less than honorable.
To segue on what Bill said then, our staff must have some idea of the parameters set forth that OHM's to meet for that money. Those would be the same parameters that
What are
would
the
apply to anybody.
deliverables?
Yeah.
Would it be wrong to have, or would it be appropriate for just to direct our staff to go sit down and chat with OHM and see what they came up with and come back to us at the next board meeting? To move forward at that point before, because they may come back and we may go, hey, that sounds good. I mean, we're talking about 2 million, but it could come back 1.2.
You know, that's actually a good idea. What if, I mean, you know, what if you went to and said, look, tell us why we should just, tell us why this board should adopt OHM now. Give us something that says that they've got some kind of advantage that'll save us money, that'll get us better engineering, that'll be more predictable. I mean, that seems to me, well,
That's it, 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs, phase 2. There are three scenarios. And that's what they're doing, is they're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I interpret this as that for $2 million,
Up to.
up to $2 million, they're gonna,
Charge them for that.
yeah.
that was such a big window, I mean, it's.
I mean, $2 million, they're gonna come up with the second, third, and fourth paragraph, basically, of phase 2. They had to know at OHM what the scope was in order to come up with a dollar amount, right? How did they get that? Did our staff provide it?
And they have $1 million cushion
I
there.
think that was part of our study.
Are
that
we
paid
talking
for.
phase 2 or are we talking Hammond
Phase
Road?
2,
Phase 2.
phase 2. This is for, yeah, it's not an obligation for 3 and 5, 3, 4, and 5. This is just phase 2.
Which
$2
is the
million for
environmental,
phase
right?
2, over 2 years, $1 million a year,
Mhm.
to provide their analysis of the phase 2.
Could we,
So I-
could we control the costs by eliminating some of the options?
No, not really. This is exactly what we're talking. This is phase 2. This is what
You
we
have to
need
have
to
the
do.
options.
These are the things that we
Right.
cannot skip out on
Right,
anything.
this is the environmental stuff.
Yeah.
So we have to go
Everything-
through the due diligence.
What about having them, staff meet with OHM? If staff feels comfortable that that's a good recommendation, have OHM come back to our meeting and convince us that we want to hire them again. And if we don't, we can then go forward with telling staff to go out to QBS.
From a salesman's perspective, dude, I would love that opportunity as a salesman, to have the staff be convinced, then have them go to their bosses and say, hey, do it. But the reality is, if I'm running an organization, I need to make sure I'm getting the right thing for my buck, so I need to see other solutions.
Another reality is cheapest isn't always better.
I'm sorry, Bill,
Cheapest isn't always better.
no, this isn't
Especially
about
with
cheapest
engineering.
at all.
We
Right,
know
but-
that there's some engineering projects out there where the engineers who did the work were not the best pick and the results were less than desirable.
How's that washback?
Well, I wasn't thinking about the washback, but
What do you think, Carl?
I can think of two.
It's a
three
walk.
others.
You're thinking, I know you're thinking over there.
Well, it is the most critical step here. I mean, we've got to have all of our ducks in a row here. I mean, this isn't one we can skimp on, and I'm not saying that 2 million is the proper number. I'm not saying that at all. But the firm, whichever firm is gonna do this, we need to make sure that they are the ones that understand this process to a T. Because I mean, if the difference is, like you said, low prices, if we're looking at a few $1,000s difference and the other one don't have a clue, we've defeated the purpose of what we're doing here, because we're gonna be struggling from then on. So I guess the thing is through this process, I mean, who stands head and shoulders above the rest? Is it OHM? And then I guess if it is them, then we need to negotiate that
Well-
price, if in fact that's who it is.
Clearly-
I don't know that.
Clearly, we use OHM's engineering services. Our staff at this point has already recommended that we go this route. option A. They do have an understanding of what we're looking for. I think we've made it very clear the direction we're going. We've just approved them to do the work for our Hammond project. If we're not going to be somehow engaging in a competitive process, which is really hard for me to swallow.
Me too.
I mean,
Then-
but at the same time,
Then we do it.
at the same time, now, at the same time, we talk about whether or not, at the same time, we talk about whether or not any of us is gonna be alive by the time, the bridge is built. I mean, ultimately, that's, you know,
I don't care if I'm alive or not.
my point
In the parking lot, I know
is,
out the door.
my point is that we have already commented on whether we'd like it to be 7 to 9 years or 9 to 12 years, or, I mean, we're talking about how we want to make sure this thing is gonna happen, and we're not gonna get hung up at a particular phase.
Yep.
So, at this point, we kinda have to make a decision whether or not we wanna go to OHM, or we wanna have, an opportunity for some other qualified people to, engage with our staff.
There's no clear-cut way that we can look at it and say that this is it. You know, I mean, it's not there's a certain amount of trust and faith and good feelings, and, I mean, when we hire an attorney, we don't say, well, you know, how good are you, and maybe they push the button on the clock a little too soon, or whatever. I mean, you're looking at the results. Same thing with accounting and stuff. I mean, it's more of a professional services type engagement as it is like buying a truck or a ton of hot mix. So I guess I'll go out on a limb here and make a motion that we accept the OHM staff recommendations for OHM.
Do we have support for that? I'll support it for a vote.
It's the only way we're gonna move
Well,
forward.
I got a couple more questions here, I guess. The number that we've thrown out there, is that in-house number that we figured, or was that information, any information given us by OHM, I guess? That's question one.
The 1 to
The
2
1
million.
to 2 million, that's from that.
That is from them.
And a lot of it is dependent upon how much they can
Use
from the
fire.
previous environmental.
I would,
Figure 2 million.
you know, I wanna see a contract or something before I say, yeah, we'll do 2 million, which is what this sounds like, we're authorizing that.
No, you're authorizing us to negotiate.
Okay.
You're not authorizing a
I'm
contract,
happy
you're
with that now.
authorizing us to negotiate with them.
Yep, okay, I'm comfortable with
So
that
we
now.
can still say no at that point.
Okay,
We gotta move forward.
all right. Roll call, please.
McKellar, or no, excuse, yeah, McKellar,
No.
Mauser,
Yes.
Brown,
We're not spending any money today.
I know we're not. Yes.
Merrick,
Yes.
Dillman,
Yes.
I like this process.
It hurts.
You know what?
But we
Then
at the
here's
next
the thing, guys. It's incumbent on our board to not accept the status quo and to change the process. And we had heard tonight even that somebody had worked in the blended environment. I'd like to know more about that. And I think this is gonna come back and bite us in the ass.
But we could,
In fact, I know it is.
then you could ask Wayne about that, and we could potentially do that next month, or at the next meeting when
We
they
haven't
come back with the contract.
accepted that yet.
I
So
know.
But I think we need to keep moving forward, at least to get
Let's
the
keep
number
moving
and
forward
a
at this
potential on a
point.
We can
contract.
say no
While
at the next
maybe
All right.
engaging staff to look at something
Is
else.
that the last of the east-west corridor stuff now?
I appreciate that.
And I would like to
For
hear that
now?
now.
Well,
Well, then
What else?
talk to the chair.
Next,
Please.
the next thing is just something as kind of like for us, what your expectations are for updates. When we start hitting milestones, we're definitely going to be updating you every time we hit milestones. But at this point, you know, we're gonna come to you next month. Do you wanna start hearing every 3 months how things are progressing? Do you wanna wait until we hit 6 months? Do you wanna wait until we hit these milestones? How often do you want us to bring back information to you so that we can keep you as informed as you want without taking up tons of time that doesn't need to be, I guess is the question.
I think each month when you give your report, just, you don't have to speak at any length on it, just
Okay.
put what you might think is important for us to hear.
Okay, that's perfect.
I agree with that.
That's all then for that.
Okay, anything else? Then let's move on to 8A, informational items. Paul Bunyan Council meeting is November 22nd. Deb, November 21st. Deb has requested us to RSVP if we plan on going by November 7th.
Oh, no,
Yes.
I'll be gone.
You're not flying back for that?
Not
Oh, for the
that.
21st, right, yeah.
No.
So. Other than that, I guess that brings us to number 9, our second public comment. Is there anybody in the public who would like to say something? She'll read the rules, but when you can come right up here and prepare yourself for those valuable
You don't
insights.
have it memorized?
I probably could. Any person may make an advance appointment with the board regarding road commission topics for a regular or special meeting in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. If an appointment is made, the topic will be an agenda item. The following applies to public comment. Please state your name and address. The topic must be relevant to the road commission. Individuals are allowed to speak once up to 3 minutes on a single topic, which could be extended by the chair. A group addressing the board requires a designated spokesperson who may speak up to 10 minutes, and the board will not act on any item from the public that is not on the agenda.
Okay.
Your name
Couple-
and address?
Name?
My name is Anthony Brown. I'm a Blair Township resident. I travel the east-west corridor 6 days a week. I see the issues. I've traveled it for 10 years. I've seen the traffic buildup. I've called you guys and asked about traffic studies. So I've stayed on top of this for a decade now. My concern is if you guys could pull that picture back up of the second phase where line A was going across, you're talking about the environmental impact, and this is just a first question, I apologize. Right at the end of Keystone and Hammond Road, you've got a private homeowner. What is this gonna do to home property values with wherever the proposed route is? That's one question. And what's gonna happen with his driveway, which comes out right at that intersection? The other one is you speak of the fiscal responsibility. For me to get from literally Hammond and Keystone to 4 Mile, going north into Elk Rapids to work every day, even with morning rush hour traffic, it takes me 10 minutes or less to span that whole entire lane. There is no issue with Hammond Road. The issue is Keystone. You've got one traffic light on Keystone, actually 2, which you kind of solve partly the issue of Beitner. When Cass in the evening is dealing with rush hour traffic leaving the city, that backs up to everywhere else, to include to Lafreniere. With these proposed projects, and I agree with some of your comments that you're starting on the wrong end. What are you gonna do when all of a sudden there's all these roundabouts coming into 1 or 2 traffic lights in a small little section, like right out here, and then another traffic light at Keystone and Hammond? You already have gridlock that you're not trying to solve right now. You're working on a free-flowing, easy-moving section to start with. And this is just a decade of living in this area.
Is that it?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. We got off the respond to the public comment thing in our last meeting, trying to rein that back in. But your comments are noted. Any other public comment? John?
John Nelson, Cochise Crest, Traverse City.
a couple things. One is your staff started out by saying that they're gonna carefully look at, in phase 2, look at all the, or 3 different options. It's really important that you do that in a real diligent way, because the last project failed because prudent and feasible alternatives were not examined carefully. It sounded to me like, with the subsequent discussion that you're having, along with some of Brad's comments, sounded like the decision was already made on where the crossing, your new crossing would potentially be. And I just caution you, please don't make any decision ahead of time. Look at all the different options, and because you're going to get stuck with prudent and feasible alternatives if you don't. I think it's very important that you carefully look at these options from a cost-benefit perspective. The cost financially and the cost environmentally balanced against what is the benefit for traffic movement for these different options. It's really important. And if you don't, I fear that if you're going to spend our money the way you're, $1 to $2 million on phase 2, you're going to have some significant organized opposition to your millage request, because people are going to see it as a waste of money or money being spent. I think it's basically, I think what you're doing right now is premature. I think we ought to be wait until the roundabouts are done, wait until the signal optimization is done, see what it does for the traffic, and then start looking at spending $1 to $2 million down the road for a crossing of the river, another crossing of the river. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Chuck?
Hello, Chuck Corn, Heritage Way, Traverse City, Michigan. Couple of things. Number one, on your used vehicles, there's a website called Municibid that I know we've had some really good results with. People got a lot more out of vehicles than they thought they would. It's no cost to you as the seller. The buyer pays a fee. It's worth a shot. 2, I'm really excited about the Cass Road and Keystone roundabout and moving the driveway from the soccer fields. That's a major issue, like every weekend in the fall and summer. And I was very happy to see that. There's a little creativity there that will, I think, benefit everybody in the long run. Once again, I want to thank you for your thoughtful deliberation. I think the simple fact is this area is going to continue to grow. Some people want to pretend like we're not going to drive cars. The Jetsons flying cars aren't here yet. There's going to be a lot more cars, and even if they have driverless cars, they're going to need roads and bridges. So this is going to take time, and by the time we're able to build the solution, whatever it is, we will be very ready for it. Thank you for your hard work.
Thanks, Chuck. Any additional comment? Seeing none, let's move on to our next public manager's comments.
I think you've heard enough from me tonight, and we're going to be meeting next week anyway, so we'll talk next week.
Commissioners, can I start with Bill?
I guess the only thing I've got to talk about or would mention is, and I brought this up a little earlier, is McCray Hill Road. It's in really bad shape. There's been a suggestion or two made from residents and some conversation I've had with township people about the possibility of, instead of McCray Hill being a through road, that intersection be ended and a couple of cul-de-sacs down toward the end, and then a pretty decent patch job put on it rather than. And it was suggested that maybe we could approach Garfield Township, and they may be amenable to the idea of dealing with it as a project. Because if you look at our basic criteria for determining if a road gets some work done or not, the fact that 31 is just 100 yards to the west, or to the east, it would probably be a long time before it comes to the top of the heap. But if we look at another creative solution, possibly we might be able to take care of that a little sooner.
Yeah, I agree.
It needs it.
Okay, Andy?
For a near future agenda item, I'd like to have Wayne also talk about the blended option of how you did the funding or the going out for engineering services, like what we're looking at for phase 2. Before we go into a contract with somebody, I'd like to hear other options. I don't want to be handcuffed into something because I didn't have all the information available, and I think it'd be important to have a discussion
How we contract.
how other ways that maybe we can do going into a step for phase 2. Because we authorize staff to look at a contract, get the contract from, doesn't mean we're gonna approve that contract, and if there's another way that we can do it that may be more prudent in money and quality of service, I'd like to know what that could be. Doesn't mean we're gonna change direction on something, but if we don't know, we don't know. That's all I have.
Carl?
I'm good.
I echo what Andy said. And then one other thing is that I know we're coming up into our open enrollment time here soon, and that we have Metropolitan for our dental insurance. Well, I'm going to share with you my experience with Metropolitan Dental. I have a crown that needs to be put on. I have had Metropolitan turn it down flat twice. I have another insurance carrier that looked at it and they're going to pay full. Taking it to other people and showed it. And they said, at my dentist office, they can't understand why this carrier was just flat out not. Because when it was submitted a year ago, it was a small fracture, wasn't a big deal, you had to have really high, the x-rays to show everything, and now the dentist can look and see it with his naked eye. So what I'm telling you is that, well, not telling, what I would ask is that we take a serious look at what we're doing for our employees, okay? Because if we're paying good money for Metropolitan, but we're getting no outcome, and services aren't being covered, then it's better to pay the same or more with somebody else and actually get the benefit. So I'm going back and forth with Metropolitan, and I tell you where I'm gonna end up, wasting my time. So, it's not worth it.
I know I had my say, but since he brought this up, and I guess it wasn't right on the tip of my tongue, the one experience I had in Metropolitan was not good either. I went in for a consult, or I was recommended for a consult, went in. They said I didn't have insurance. I talked to Phil. Phil says, well, we've been paying the premium for the last 8 months. You do have coverage. And it took about 4 or 5 weeks before they had to basically, a couple of phone calls, and I think on his part as well, before they said, well, oh yeah, I guess you do. And then it took about 3 attempts before they, first they said, your share is this much, and they said, well, no, it's this much, then it's this much. So, whether it's anecdotal, but apparently it's happened to a couple of us, and it was apparently, experience has not been that great.
This is just isolated. I mean, it couldn't possibly happen to anybody else besides you, and me. I had the same issue with my dental, but I'll tell you, the problem that they had with you is because you did have somebody else who would cover it, and they search for those.
Well,
that's one
fine.
of their
But in the state of Michigan, they're obligated
Yeah.
to cooperate. So what happens is, the primary carrier, which is my primary employer, they're gonna cover first. And the next one's gonna come in and cover a portion of it. And their portion is minute, but the reasons are saying that it is out of their scope, that the work doesn't need to be done. You know what happens? Then end up with a root canal.
Yeah.
And then guess what they say?
I got a drill.
We're not gonna cover that, I know. So
I
would say, what we're paying for, we're not getting our value.
if we could just at least keep it on the radar for when we do our selection process.
That maybe another dental.
Well, I mean,
insurance
at
from Brown
least
and
make
Brown
it known that there's
suggested.
some serious problems. And I have to think, and I was actually thinking it was just me. But since you brought it up, and you brought it up,
Well, he brought it up, so I brought it up, but
You know. so, all right.
I haven't
Now
had
it
that,
was
so-
falling.
I would also keep in mind that Metropolitan is also the life insurance carrier
Yes.
that required people that when we moved over, when we changed our broker, it was still Metropolitan, it's still Metropolitan Life. They required people that had for years been in the group plan to requalify.
Hmm.
And some of the guys just threw up their hands and said, I'm not doing it. So we have employees that maybe had $50,000 or $100,000 worth of life insurance that walked away out of frustration. So, no, the broker has not held it up, and the Metropolitan